Hey, what's up? This is Mark at alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today, we're going to set up redirect URLs for our content site. Last time, we set it up so that you could comment from within individual show pages, and the challenge I left you with was to set up redirect URLs so that, say, if you edit a comment, I've got a small comment here, I'll change this into a big comment. If you edit this comment, it should take you back to the show page where you just were instead of to a comment listing. We still have the comment listing here. This is not supposed to show up to end users at all, but maybe this is useful for an admin. So you can see I've got this listing of all the comments. I can show them. If I hit back from here, it takes me back to the listing of all the comments. Here's the one I just edited. I can edit this again and say I'll make this an emphatic comment. And when I save this, it takes me back to the same show page. I hit back, I'm in the listing. So how do we set this up with redirect URLs so that when the comments are created or acted upon from the show page, you stay on the show page, otherwise you don't. So just one more time, yet another comment. We're creating a new one and we get redirected to where it is. And notice that JavaScript is off. I haven't used anything related to live view for any of this. I'm going to show you two ways to set up redirects so that your users get sent to the page where they should. The first way is more complete, like this, and it preserves the behavior for admins who might want to look at the entire listing. The second way will just send the user back to the show page with the comment on it after any creation or edit or update, but it's much, much simpler. Okay, so first way, the more complicated way. All right, I've full screened the code and bumped up the font size a little bit. You can see everything that matters will be a file in yellow or green. This one green one is not really a new file. This is just like what we had set up last episode, except I added this redirect URL. It's just that in my current repo, there is no .eex file for this page. I only have the live template version of it you see here. So let's start with the template itself for the comment, or not for the comment, for the podcast show. So this is where everything starts. When we show the podcast page, you see the show notes, and then under that, we see the comment section, and this comments.html renders all of that. We're passing in our current URL of the podcast page being shown. Then when we get into this comments page, we use that current URL to build a longer redirect URL. So for example, you might be on /podcast/2 #comment -28 if you are on comment number 28 on podcast page 2. And then we use this URL as a redirect URL when we write our route at the bottom here for edit. Now, this is not something built into Phoenix. I just named it redirect URL. I could have named it anything. This gets passed as a query string parameter. So in fact, if we go back and look at the page, we have, let's see here, if we click edit, or if we just hover over edit, you can see localhost 4000 /comments/1/edit question redirect _URL equals /podcast/1 #comment -1. So we're basically just passing a key value pair to the route, which gets turned into query string parameters. If we click on this, if we check the source for this form, we'll see there's a hidden comment redirect URL. So that's the redirect URL parameter we passed in. And the value is /podcast/1 #comment -1, which is the comment we're supposed to be returned to. So if we submit this, that redirect URL gets passed to the show page. And when we hover on the back button, we can see we still have that redirect URL there. So back to the code here. This is the show page. It renders the comments section of the show page. Then comments has that redirect URL in its edit that'll send you right back. But it also has an add comment.html that gets rendered, and that's going to create our new comment for us. And we're passing redirect URL comment new to that, which is something a little bit different. Inside add comment, we just pass the redirect URL along as it is. And that means we've got to handle this comment-new that was passed in somehow. Because comment new doesn't exist in our markup. It's a little bit different from these others. Comment dash the ID number of the markup actually does exist inside the markup. If we look on any of our show pages in the comment section, by the way, this whole part here is in that comments template. If we look inside here, we'll see comment-1, comment-8, comment-38. So that's why we can go directly to a comment by adding its ID to the end of the URL fragment. When we set the redirect URL to comment-new, that's dealt with entirely within our comment controller. Let's look at the show and the edit pages first, and then we'll get onto that. So in the show page, we have a very simple change. In front of each of these routes that we've set up for our links, the edit and the backlinks, we've just put redirect URL or in front of it. So if we come in from the podcast show page, there will be a redirect URL, and we'll just use that URL. If we don't, then that'll be nil, so the OR will get evaluated, or the thing after the OR will get evaluated, and we'll go to the comment path, and that's just the default behavior. The edit page is basically the same, although one minor other consideration is since it's rendering a form, we've got to pass the redirect URL along with the rest of the assigns to get to that form, so we just use map.put and put it in the assigns. Now let's have a look at the comments controller. So here is where all the interesting stuff happens. In our index, nothing has changed. Our new, nothing has changed. Because remember, that's just the admin view of all the comments. But in create and update, we've got a fair number of new things. Before we get to that, I just want to scroll down to the bottom and show a couple of helper functions I made. One is to get the redirect URL out of the params. So in any of those routes where we have a redirect URL set to something, that'll come in the params in our controller. So we can check the params. If there is a redirect, then the redirect URL is that redirect. If there isn't a redirect, then since we may use this URL, or we'll pass this URL somewhere it'll get used, we'll use a default. We can either call the function with two variables, or if we don't specify a default, we'll default to the module attribute, default route, which is just the comment path's index. Now let's take a look at the edit function. Just as before, we're getting a comment out of the database, and we're getting a comment change set to pass along to the form. And now we've also got a redirect URL. This redirect URL is that function we just created at the bottom. So we're checking to see if there's a redirect URL in the params. If there isn't, well, we didn't pass it a second attribute, so we're just going to go to this default, which is the comment index. If there is a redirect URL in the params, we'll just go to that URL directly. And in update, so this is after the edit form's been submitted, we've got a comment, which is okay here. And we do the same thing as before, except we pass along this redirect URL. That way, when the comment is successful and the user is taken to the show page, the comment show page, the back button will still take the user to the podcast show page where they originally commented, instead of to the admin view of listing all the comments. Now, on to the most complicated case, and that is create comment. when a comment's created, we may have this special comment new in the redirect URL. If that's the case, we need to parse that out. So we basically do a case on the params redirect URL. We can't use that helper function at the bottom because we need to check for this comment new. If the redirect URL is #comment-new, then the redirect will be to the podcast path appended by #comment- the comment we just got out of the database after it was created, .id, to get its ID. If there is no redirect URL, then we just go to the comment path show comment, which is the default behavior. If for some reason there's some other redirect URL, then we'll send the user there. Then down here, redirect to URL, that's where we use this variable we created. Then if there's an error, well, then we want to check the redirect URL, and basically we'll ignore comment-new. We'll just send the user to the index. If there's something else, then we'll send them there. And that's really all there is from the comment controller. The podcast controller, I'll just point out briefly, nothing had to change here, because while we changed some templates that were embedded in the podcast show page, all of these actions related to comments are going to the comment controller, not the podcast controller. Okay, so that is the more complicated solution that handles everything. Now let's look at the easy way. I've changed over to another branch that implemented the redirects in a much simpler way. And now let's look at the specific changes it took to do it. So I'm going to git diff head caret to see just the changes in the one commit it took. And let's just look at the names of the files. So we'll do name only instead of seeing the entire git diff. I only did change 4 files: the edit, new, and show templates under comments, and the comment view. The view is the most important part. I've just added a single function, comment URL, and it takes a comment struct. So I'm just pattern matching on that, and it returns the podcast path for the podcast that that comment was made on, and then we append the familiar #comment- whatever the ID of the comment is to it. Let's take a look at this in IEX, where it'll be a little bit easier to understand. So I'm aliasing the router helpers as seen here, and I'll also alias the endpoint.ex so that we can run exactly the code we see here. The routes podcast path endpoint show, and then we'll need a comment to put a podcast into. Actually, we'll just copy that exactly as is and just put a podcast number in here. So you can see that'll get us podcasts /2. And if we were to get a specific comment from the database, like content.get comment, I believe number 7 exists. There we go. And now we should be able to just do comment.podcast ID, and we'll get the route for the podcast it was on. And if we were to append to this the next line, we'll get the familiar #comment- comment ID as seen. So on any given comment, we'll get a reasonable route out of it that'll take us to the podcast page where the comment was posted and down to the comment itself. So we can try out this function itself, reactor web.comment view.comment URL on our comment, and we see we get that route as we would expect. So what we can do with this is just use that little helper in our views. And let's go to the edit view first. You'll see I've just said comment URL comment on the backlink, and I didn't do anything to the form. So we've changed the backlink on the edit, and we'll look at show next. We've changed the same link, same sort of way in the show page. So the backlink now goes to the comment URL for that comment. And the new page, was just a tiny change of going to the podcast path instead of going to the comment path. And then we'll go to comment.podcastid. So that's really all that I changed, and none of the embedded forms had to be changed. Let's have a look at this in the browser. So we'll reload here. So first we'll try editing this comment, and we'll see the back button still takes you back to the comment as it should. Creating a new comment will keep you, or it'll send you back to the page where you want to be. So all of this looks just as it should. The difference though, and the reason why this is so much simpler to do than what I showed you for most of this episode, is if you go directly to a comment, either a show page or an edit page, and you click back, you're still going to get sent back to the podcast page. So we didn't have to send any redirect URLs because we're not keeping track of any redirects. We're just automatically sending you to the podcast page, since we assume that's where you would want to be, although maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you want to do it the hard way. So that's it for today. I hope you found this a useful contrast, and at least for me, I very much love the strategy of doing this the easy way. Unless there were really some hard requirements, I'd rather just not mess around with all the passing around redirect URLs. But I'd be interested in seeing what your solutions were, so just comment them below the episode. It's a bit easier to do that on Alchemist Camp than on YouTube, because I support Markdown syntax in my comments and YouTube doesn't. But either way, interested in seeing your comments, and see you next time.